This week we're talking about the rhetorical mode of exposition. In general, we can break down writing into 4 different rhetorical modes, and those are exposition, narration, description, and argumentation. Exposition is primarily the rhetorical mode that explains things, and thus it's often informative. And this trimester we'll be covering the 3 modes of narration, exposition, and description. But elements of description can and often are present in exposition as well, so be sure to look for overlap between the two. Remember that the reason we have these categories is to help us distinguish different kinds of writing and their purposes, but it's not meant to restrain or to confine the methods or reaches of a particular piece. Most nonfiction essays are generally expository in nature, and there are a number of different patterns of exposition that it's helpful to be aware of. So I'm going to give you a list of a few of them and an explanation of what they may look like and an idea of what some items you might see that fall within those categories could be. It's good to keep these kind of terms in mind because in the AP exam, sometimes some of the multiple choice questions might ask what the general mode or purpose of a piece is, and some of these descriptors can be the choices that you'll end up selecting from. So the first I'll give you is comparison and contrast. And this is basically a look at 2 items that share similar characteristics as well as some opposite ones. And often you'll find that the elements that contrast between the 2 items reveal the most poignant info about the nature of the things being compared. Later we'll read Mencken's essay, A Libido for the Ugly, and this has this characteristic in some sense because it contrasts the affluence of an area with the ugliness that characterizes it. Another thing you might encounter is the idea of problem and solution. Basically, this kind of essay is going to explain a problem that exists and then go on to articulate a solution to that problem. So most persuasive speeches that you would hear would fall into this category, and many political addresses would also. Wendell Berry's essay, The Pleasures of Eating, that we read, has this kind of form. He suggests to us the lack of concern that consumers have about what they eat, and he proposes a number of different means that they could take to change both their awareness and their practice of consumerism. A third might be the process analysis, and that's basically a step-by-step explanation of the tasks that are necessary to complete a process. So this kind of piece is often a very technical one, and in some sense, items like recipes or even instruction manuals can fall into this category. Though less technical ones exist as well, certainly. Fourth would be just the description. And while description, those elements fall into various categories, could be a category in itself in some ways, often within explanations of things we'll find descriptive elements. And often these are the use of details, often sensory ones, that tend to create vivid images of people, places, or situations. Description is often part of any kind of expository piece since we tend to need to describe as we explain and as we inform. And the Ring of Time essay that we read in this course is a great example of a descriptive essay. It explains an idea, but it does it through describing an image of a girl in the ring. The fifth would be definition, and we've already written one of these. You wrote a definition of the term rhetoric. In this kind of essay, the author takes a complex term or concept and he gives a detailed explanation of it, often including discussion of more technical elements relating to the actual idea. Number 6 would be something I'll call narrative interspersion, and this is more of an expository effect than as a whole mode in itself. But in instances where narrative interspersion occurs, the writer interrupts his explanation to provide examples, and those often include stories, and those exemplify his point. So in this sense, narrative has some role in exposition also because stories are being included with explanation in order to describe and explain. And then the last mode I'll mention here is the idea of analogy. Sometimes you'll find that the whole of an essay, or at least a central part of it, actually factors around the comparison of one thing to another. And the intent of that is to elucidate elements of the topic at hand through the item used as an analogy. So later in the year, we're going to read an essay by Malcolm Gladwell that debunks the U.S. News college ranking system. And when he does that, he does it by comparing colleges and the criteria that people have established for them with the same kind of criteria that people have established for cars and their attributes. So these are different types of exposition to keep in mind. And you can think about these and what elements of them are present in essays whenever you read them. And that will be a great help to you as you prepare for the exam.